Yeah.
Um, I know you're speaking at the U.S. Social Forum in a couple weeks, and I wanted to ask if you could talk about how, in particular in this context, how do you see answering people or speaking to people, or how do you view people who are arguing that what's needed is to build up the sustainable living within the margins or in the interstices or whatever of this society? Because I know that is a big, including right now, a big argument that's coming from a lot of people who are trying to do a lot of good.
Well, I mean, you're talking about like alternative lifestyles and things like that. But look, I think we have to have a sort of a one divides into two understanding of this. In other words, on the one hand, it's not a bad thing if people want to recycle and minimize waste and wasteful activity and pay attention to those kinds of questions. I mean, I think it's when people, and a lot of people feel this way. So it's not a bad, this is something that is meaningful to people. And I think we have to recognize that. And it's a statement. I mean, I know I've talked with young people about it, and they feel that this is a statement that they're making about the waste and the toxicity in all senses of the word in this society. So I think that that's one aspect of this. But on the other hand, I think we have to be very clear, and this is the principal aspect. That solution doesn't measure up to the problem. It doesn't speak to the enormity of what we face. And I don't want to have to revisit my whole speech, rehearse it here, but when we look at the enormous forces at work, and how capitalism functions, and we look at this Gulf crisis, there is no way that sort of absenting ourselves, moving out of the moving out of society and sort of living a environmentally correct life is going to speak to the crisis that humanity faces. And in a certain sense, that becomes a reinforcement of the status quo because we're not going up against the powers that are responsible for this and actually mobilizing people in a meaningful way so that we can build this movement for revolution and raise people's understanding for what it's really going to take. What does measure up? And that is revolution. That is the total and radical reorganization of society and economy. And in the new socialist society, that's when we can really unleash people to come up with all kinds of creative solutions for how we can live differently, how we can consume differently, how we can use, non-renewable resources in ways that conserve them to the max, and how we can move into other modes of energy production and consumption. In other words, it's in the new socialist society that we can really unleash all of that. But in this society, which is perpetrating these crimes and these horrors, which are visiting the entire planet, which are bringing ruin to livelihoods and lives throughout this planet, the idea that by just living a good, pure life doesn't speak to it, and it's also, as I said, taking people away from the reality that we have to confront, the truth that I said about the nature of capitalism and the kind of movement, the kind of struggle, the kind of revolution that we have to make to actually get at the mainsprings of this crisis. So I think this is the kind of debate. I'm looking forward to this at the U.S. Social Forum. But we really have to focus on getting rid of this system. And what it's going to take to do that and replace it with what? We have a vision, we have a plan, we have a strategy. And that is really what we have to reach out to people about. And right now, we have this particular challenge before us around the Gulf, right? And here people have to come together and we have to mobilize in this way. There's something else I want to say about this question of living, your life in a certain way. There's a certain way in which that becomes possible in the advanced capitalist countries. While there's incredible environmental ruin and destruction in the impoverished regions of the world, where people don't have those options to buy organic, to live frugally. Right? They don't have those options to live frugally. People are dying of starvation. People are literally dying in toxic wastelands. Children, are picking through garbage dumps in Manila. I was there. I went to Manila. Saw shantytowns built right on top of these e-dumps, electronic waste. That's not an option for people in those systems. That's the bulk of humanity. So we can't just think about ourselves and what would be personally and individually satisfying. When we talk about a moral stance and a moral position, we have to see it in relation to the needs of humanity and not determined by what we, as an illusory, self-contained individual or family or community of people, want to do to be right and environmentally pure. We have to save the environment. We have to go up against this catastrophe in the Gulf. And that means acting in concert. It means acting in meaningful and creative and determined ways. And it means for us bringing forward the revolutionary solution to this, raising people's sights. So these are the kinds of questions that will be faced in Detroit, and this is the kind of discussion, dialogue, and debate that we have to have. As I said, there's an element of this that is positive. People don't, I don't applaud people just throwing stuff into the streets and just, this is not, it's something that people feel strongly about. But they have to come to grips with the actual problem and the actual solution. And as I said, all of these ideas will be flowering in the new socialist society, because this is a critical element of our principles of sustainable development, to work through different ways of living and interacting with nature. So that's how I would go at that. I don't know if it speaks to what you're raising here, but that's, and I feel even this moral question has to be conceptualized correctly.